Hey everybody, this is Darren, and you're either watching or listening to Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. Today, I got a lot to talk about. Obviously, if you've listened before, we're going to go over the picks of the week. I'm going to give you two good picks, two good movie recommendations from all the major streaming services, what to watch for a rental this week, and your best bet for the theater. Then we're going to get into the Obama Netflix deal and the boycott that may or may not be occurring. We're going to talk about what that means a little bit. It should be pretty interesting. I'm interested in it. And then some movies I watched this week, so some additional recommendations of what to watch and what not to watch. And then really I want to get into whether or not movies suck more today than they used to, or is it just the way we perceive it? And one way I'm going to go about talking about that is to really kind of try to figure out what are some of the best movies that have been made in the last 10 years or so. I say or so. I'm sticking in the last 10 years. We'll get into that as well. So by the end of the show, you should have a ton of recommendations, at least a couple of good movies to watch that you have not heard of. That's really the point of the YouTube channel right now, or at least the main drive of it. If you're listening on the podcast, check out the YouTube channel. I do put this up as a video every Monday when the podcast launches. I also do other videos throughout the rest of the week. One is sort of an edited version of the flicks of the week we're about to go over. One is just a list of like 10 movies from a specific genre. So they're going to be movies I'm not talking about here. I tend to lately I've been posting a movie review, and that review is for like a smaller movie that you can currently watch on Netflix or Prime, or, you know, one that's easily accessible rather than what's just come out in the theater recently. I'll maybe talk a little bit more about why I talk about those movies versus what has been out in the theaters lately. But that's basically where we're going to start. So Netflix, I don't know what's going on with them lately. By the way, I talk a lot about movies on Netflix and Prime and all that. I'm not sponsored by any of them, so I can say whatever I want. But Netflix their movie selections have been really poor. And it's not just you, if you agree, it's not just your perception. Like, I research this stuff every week. I try to find stuff to recommend. I had a rough time this week. Now, I came through. I've got some good recommendations, but man, like everything they added in the month of June is pretty weak, with the exception of 2 or 3. 2 of them are my picks of the week this week. So for Netflix recommendations this week, I want to recommend The Departed. Sorry, if you're listening on the podcast or the YouTube channel, I'm up in the attic and the air conditioning just caused the door to open. So I don't want to stop. My family is going to hear me do the entire podcast now, and if you start to hear a screaming toddler, I'll figure something out. I'll do something about it. But basically, for my picks of the week, starting with Netflix, I really want to recommend The Departed. I know it's one everybody has seen, but Netflix is slowly trickling out Scorsese's best movies. They keep adding like one every month. This month is The Departed. It's one of my personal favorites. Now, my favorite movie of all time is Goodfellas, but back when this came out, I kind of thought it might dethrone Goodfellas, and as time has shown, it really hasn't. But what I will say about The Departed, and if you didn't really get this from it on like one viewing, I'd really encourage you to revisit it. It is not just one of the best paced movies I've ever seen. It's almost 3 hours, but it's so quickly paced. It just goes boom, boom, boom to the next thing, and it establishes everything really well. Like, you're very rarely, even just on the first viewing, confused. Like, Scorsese has just become such a master at storytelling. The Departed, even if you don't like this story, which I happen to love it, I love these kinds of movies, but even if you're not into it, I'm telling you, from someone that watches an ungodly amount of movies, this one is one of the most expertly crafted I have ever seen. That said, I just love Goodfellas so much. It just couldn't beat it. So The Departed is a great pick. Now, on June 5th, so not the first day that I launched this, but this week, June 5th, Thor Ragnarok is getting launched on Netflix. It's going to be their biggest movie of the month. I'm sure a lot of you saw it because this one did really well. If you didn't see it, don't rent it now. Wait for June 5th. Watch it. I highly recommend this one. And this is coming from someone that's not really a Marvel fanboy. Now, I like the movies all right. I mean, I'm not really hating on them. I don't particularly like the latest DC movies. But the Marvel ones, a lot of them tend to just kind of feel almost like TV episodes. And obviously big budget ones. But they just feel like episodes rather than like unique cinematic experiences onto themselves. Thor Ragnarok is almost that. It's almost its own unique thing that sort of stands out. It's the director. I can never say his name. He's from New Zealand. He's done some really funny movies in the past. If you saw What We Do in the Shadows or Hunt for the Wilder People, which I've recommended both on this channel multiple times, he directed this. It's got a really good sense of humor. It doesn't feel forced, or at least it didn't to me. Jeff Goldblum's got a great appearance in it. It's a really fun movie. It's almost as fun as Guardians of the Galaxy, which is really my favorite Marvel movie. This one is up there. This one's probably top 5, so I highly recommend it if you missed it. And I definitely recommend it even if you didn't like the other 2 Thor movies, which I'm in that camp. For Amazon is really killing it. I just mentioned that on Friday's video on the YouTube channel. I had 10 really good movies that they just added on June 1st. They've got some great ones. One of the ones that I recommended in that video was Event Horizon, which isn't just one of my favorite like space horror movies. It really is one of the best. Like if Alien didn't exist, this movie might not exist either, but this one's maybe second to Alien. Let me know in the comments. We can hash that out and everything. But this one's just got a really cool feel to it. It's really unique onto itself. I know a lot of you have seen it, but based on comments I'm getting from Friday's video where I recommended this, a lot of you haven't. A lot of people miss this one. I highly recommend it. It is a horror movie. If horror movies scare you, this one's going to get you. There's a lot of gore in this one. But it's not just like torture porn or anything like that, like the Saw movies. This one's good. This one's interesting. This one's a unique movie watching experience. Another unique movie watching experience, and one of the better new releases on Prime right now, is The Disaster Artist. They just dropped it. I really enjoyed this movie. If you're a fan of The Room, this one's a must watch. You do not have to have seen The Room, the movie on which this is based, to enjoy this one. You can completely enjoy it without having seen it. It's its own thing. It's really fun, but it's about people that don't know what they're doing, making a movie, and they do a horrible job, but this friendship develops during it, and I normally don't like movies like that just sort of feature like a budding friendship, but this one's it's really well done. James Franco stars in it with heavy prosthesis. He looks crazy, but he directed it as well. Now, a lot of you probably don't know this, but Franco has directed a bunch of movies. Like, God, I mean, he's got like maybe 12 directing credits under his belt. Maybe, I don't know, maybe more. All of them suck. They're all horrible. This one is fantastic. It got overlooked at the Academy Awards and award season because he got, accused of some sexual misconduct, which sounded like some people just regretted hooking up with him. Ultimately is what it sounded like with him. I don't want to get too into that, but this movie's really fantastic. He did a great job. Hulu is almost about to get cut out of these recommendations. I'm really tired of recommending Hulu because it's tough. I got nothing new on Hulu. I shouldn't say that. I, Tonya is currently on Hulu. They are not in my picks of the week. I liked that movie, but I can't recommend it. There were so many things about it. It was inconsistent in its tone. You keep seeing her just get beat up, and then it's also trying to be funny, and it just didn't. I get what they were trying to do, and for me, it didn't work. So it's a decent movie. I mean, you can watch it, but Flick Connection is not going to recommend it. That said, I basically got to go with some oldies but goodies, and Trainspotting is currently on Hulu. If maybe you're a younger viewer or listener and you've never seen Trainspotting, this one almost like changed my life. One, definitely kept me off of heroin. Not that I was in danger of trying heroin, but this movie absolutely would have scared me off of it, maybe more so than Requiem for a Dream. But visually, this movie is just so incredible. And very similar to Goodfellas, you're basically dealing with drug addicts here. And the first half of this movie is really fun. Like, they're partying, they're having a great time, and the movie's fun. It's fun to watch. And then it starts to go down this slippery slope, and it gets darker and darker and darker. Really, for me, this one is a masterpiece. It's still Danny Boyle's best film. Highly recommend it. This one's required viewing. If you consider yourself any sort of a movie buff, you have to have watched this one. And then also, another oldie but goodie that I just happen to really like is Punch Drunk Love. This is maybe one of Paul Thomas Anderson's weaker movies, but he's such a strong director, it's still really good. And I still, like, when I think about this movie, you know, Paul Thomas Anderson's only done a handful of movies. He's one of the most highly respected directors in Hollywood at the moment, and has been for like well over a decade. And at I guess this is his third movie, he decides to have it star Adam Sandler, who is like kind of one of the most despised guys in terms of like art cinema. Like his movies are so lowbrow that sort of the Oscar community really turns their nose up at Sandler, and then one of the most respected directors just jams him as the star. That's just one of the ballsiest moves ever. But this movie's really kind of cool. It's got some heart. If you've seen it, you might not have noticed the whole opening, like the first 15 minutes is all one big long take. People keep coming in and out of his office, and it gets really frantic because he's got like this sort of nervous condition, and the movie really sort of sets the tone for that well. It's a small little story. It's a nice little love story. I recommend it. It's a good little... It's maybe a good date night movie. It's maybe not a good date night movie for somebody you don't know very well, though. I'll say that. It's got some weirdness to it. Let's see. Continuing, HBO. HBO... I'll say they have one of the best movies out of my picks of the week, and then outside of that, it's kind of hard to come up with something. But Blade Runner 2049 is currently available on HBO. This was my favorite movie from 2017. I predicted it basically a year ago, months before the movie was released. I was just paying attention to the production, who was working on it, who was involved, details in the trailers. I really watched this one closely, and I called it early, like that's going to be the best movie of 2017. And I think it was, not just because I always have to be right, but I really, really enjoyed this one. It really blew me away in the theater. I know not everyone agrees with that, and I can totally see why, but I will say I think when we look back on 2017, Blade Runner is going to be one of the ones that really stands out. Unfortunately, it did not do well in the box office, and we may never get another one because of it. That said, the first one didn't do well in the box office either, and we eventually got a sequel, albeit 30 years later. I'd love to see more from this universe. It's really just amazing. It's so well done, but it's also so expensive to do something like this and to make it rated R where you can't sell as many tickets, and to make it almost 3 hours where you can't sell as many tickets. So that really sort of crippled this one from the get-go. And then the original Blade Runner's got a fairly niche audience. I'll say if you have not seen it, you don't... I would say if you haven't seen the original Blade Runner, don't watch it before you watch Blade Runner 2049. There are things you're not going to get, but you're going to get plenty. You're going to understand plenty. If you like it and you want to understand more, go back and watch the original. The reason I say that is the original is fairly slowly paced. It does take multiple viewings to really sort of, not just like get it, you know, like you're not smart enough, but it takes multiple viewings to really kind of get what they were trying to do with it, I think. And you could get turned off on the first go round, but Blade Runner 2049 is beautiful. Luckily it won an Academy Award for the best cinematography, and it really has some of the best cinematography I've ever seen, and that says a lot. So I'm gushing, I know it. But I highly recommend it. It is a must-watch. If you got to watch something else, you want to watch something classic, I always like to include like one classic movie on my picks of the week, or my flicks of the week. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is on HBO. I can watch that movie anytime. It's by no means my favorite Western. It's a little bit watered down, but it's fun. Like, it's really just enjoyable to watch every single time. It's got action in it. It's got comedy. It's heavy at times. It's just got a nice... There's one sequence where they play that stupid song. It's not Singing in the Rain. They play a stupid song where they're riding a bicycle, and it just grates on my nerves. I need to edit my own version of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I need to rip it, cut that scene out. It's not needed. It's stupid, and put it back together. And I'll just watch that one from now on. I just made a decision here. I'm doing a Flick Connection cut of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid that me and only me will probably ever be able to watch. But that's happening. As far as rentals go, another week. Kind of weak in that, but there's a movie called Thoroughbreds that looks really interesting. It's about two girls, like high society kind of teenage girls. One of the girls was in Split and The Witch, so she's really good, really good young actress. And they're not good girls. Well, I'll just say that they start to kind of do some bad stuff, and the story seems interesting. Like, if you want to rent something that just came out this week, you've exhausted everything else, this would be the way to go. There's some better stuff coming up in the summer, but we got a little bit of a drought in terms of good movies right now. As far as what's in the theater, Hereditary looks like it is absolutely the pick of the week. It is a horror movie. This is probably going to be like the horror movie of the year, if not the horror movie of the year. Top 3. It's already getting incredible reviews. The trailer looks sick, and the reviews are saying the trailer kind of tricks you, but in a good way. Like, I can't think of a better setup for a movie, for the trailer to look good, and then to have, respected reviewers like Vanity Fair, and I can't remember, basically all the big ones have already reviewed it, to say that not only is it really good and gut-wrenching, and it just pounds on you, that it subverts your expectations so well, and in like the best way possible. So it's been a while since I've read reviews this good on a horror movie. In fact, it was last year for Jordan Peele's Get Out. This is probably going to be the Get Out of 2018. If you're going to the theater on Friday, Saturday, this would be the one to see unless you hate horror movies. I would steer clear of this one. This one sounds like it's got some classic scares in it. So watch out for that. But that's my picks of the week. Hopefully you found something you can watch this week, at least one. If you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you're going to be watching, if anything, from my recommendations. In addition to... sort of the movies that are currently available that you can watch, there's a couple of trailers that look really, really interesting to me. Excuse me one second. If you're new to the podcast, go to the YouTube channel, check it out. You can see the set. I've got a pretty sweet little set that I just sort of built here, but I'm in an attic, essentially. So it's hot. And then I'm wearing a denim shirt because my wife told me that all my thumbnails on YouTube for this series look the same, because I'm always wearing a black Flick Connection t-shirt. So I threw on this denim shirt, and I'm freaking hot. But as far as trailers go, The Sisters Brothers looks like a really cool Western with Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly and Jake Gyllenhaal, and I can't remember his name, but the actor who was in The Night Of on HBO, he's really good, and he was in Rogue One as well. They're all in it. They're the main players, but it's about a couple of real... outlaws, and the trailer has got, I would recommend just checking it out on YouTube as well, but the trailer has just got a really cool vibe. It seems really fun and kind of quirky, but it's also kind of gritty. I like everybody that's in it. And then the director, I believe he's French, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, so I didn't even put it in my notes, but he directed a movie that I really, really love called A Prophet. I've mentioned that I'm trying to kind of work out like a series on like the best prison movies. A Prophet is definitely one of the best prison movies I've ever seen that almost no one else has seen. So there's a bonus recommendation. But he's a really, really good director. So I think this is his first 100% English speaking film. He's had some mixed language movies, but I'm excited to see it. Ooh, there goes the crack of thunder. I was trying to get this done before the thunder kicked in, but I think we'll be all right. Jurassic World, they're really ramping up their marketing, and sorry to say, I'm not excited about it. It'll be all right. I mean, it'll be pretty good, but it's such a fantastic concept, and from what I can see, they're just sort of they're playing it safe. They're kind of it'll be good, but it's such an incredible concept that you could do so much with, and I feel like they're sort of just phoning it in from the onset. Now, as far as the production and everything, that's great. They're really, the production couldn't be better, but they're phoning in sort of the concept before they even start writing the script, in my opinion. I don't know. I haven't seen it. It could be just amazing, but it looks so-so. The stuff at the volcano and Chris Pratt is running and the cloud from the volcano is catching up to him. It's come on. Yeah, he's running that fast in the grass with boots and denim on. I don't know. So they're doing that. One I've been really excited to see, Under the Silver Lake, is actually directed by the same guy that did It Follows. So this will be his first movie after It Follows, and it looks interesting. It's kind of got a neo-noir detective kind of thing. Andrew Garfield stars in it, and it was supposed to come out in 2 weeks, mid-June, and they just pushed it back to December. It's a weird move. Apparently at the Cannes Film Festival, it got mixed ratings, and mixed usually means people loved it and hated it. I hope they're not going to make him change what he wanted to do. Not because that would necessarily be bad for the film, but I want to see what he wanted to do in a second film. I don't want to see something that got meddled with too much. I'm hoping that even if it's mixed reviews, they think it may be a contender for some awards, which would make the December release date make more sense because it would have time to get some following and be ready for award season. I'm hoping that's kind of what's going on with that one. Whoa, there goes the thunder. We're going to take a break here in a minute and come back. But one other thing I wanted to say is I recommended a movie on the podcast and did a full review on it last week called Small Town Crime. Hopefully a lot of you watched it. I know I got a lot of good feedback in the comments section on YouTube, including good feedback from the writer-director of the movie. He actually reached out in the comments section and thanked me for recommending his movie. So that was just kind of cool. We don't have an open line of communication now or anything, but it's just interesting to hear from the filmmaker. Probably had Google alerts set up or something to see anytime somebody mentioned his movie, but I don't know if he watched the video or not, but I got a thanks from him. So I thought that was really kind of nice and unexpected. One quick note, if you've been listening to a couple of these episodes, I'm trying to come up with what my last name on the, basically here too, but what my internet last name is going to be. For security reasons, I don't want to give my real last name, and Darren by itself is not much of an identity, so I've been taking recommendations. I took some of those recommendations, picked my top 2. I floated them out to my Patreon supporters. They are currently voting. Hey, man, this is going to be a bad one. They are currently voting, and it sounds like Darren Van Dam is probably going to be the winner. And I got to be honest, I'm digging it. I like a couple of things about it. 1, it sounds pretty badass. 2, it doesn't sound real. 3, it relates to movies, and the initials are DVD. So that's pretty cool. If you want to vote, you can become a Patreon supporter for, I think they'll let you do it for as little as $1 a month. Put your vote in. June 9th, the polls close, and I will either become Darren Van Dam or Darren Durden on the internet forever. So feel free to go ahead and vote. You got just a couple of days left. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with the Dickhead of the Week, which is not going to be what it normally is. It's not just going to be a negative comment. It actually sort of opens up Pandora's box in terms of the Obama Netflix deal and the boycott that's now ensuing. So we're going to dig kind of deep into that. I've got some unique insight into this whole scenario that you're probably not going to get anywhere else. And then, honestly, we're going to talk about some movies I watched this week so you get even more movie recommendations. And then we're going to talk about whether or not movies suck more today than they used to, and what some of the best movies over the last 10 years have been. So, quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, and we're back, and like I said, I wanted to do the Dickhead of the Week segment. I've been doing that, been kind of pointing out one of the worst comments from the past week that I got on YouTube. Some of you like it, some of you don't like that I talk about this. You think I'm bringing too much attention to the wrong people. It's fun. These don't bother me. This one is interesting, though. This is not like a mean one. This is all caps. This is on probably, I think I did a list of sci-fi movies last week, the best sci-fi movies you can currently watch on Netflix. I think it was that video. Anyway, it might as well have been. Whew, I got a little out of breath, but best sci-fi movies on Netflix. So I'm recommending movies on Netflix. That's all the video is, and then suddenly in the comments I get, screw Netflix, all bold. Dash, I don't know why there's screw Netflix, dash, no spaces, boycott them with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exclamation points. I've never seen anyone use 5 before. I think they just sort of mashed the button and held it for a few seconds. But basically what's happening, I'm assuming this is related to the Obama thing, because suddenly Netflix offers the Obamas meaning Barack Obama and Michelle. Essentially, they're starting. I'm a little fuzzy on some of the actual details, but essentially they're starting a production company. They're going to create some shows and stuff, and Netflix bought in and is going to be releasing their content. So Netflix is the platform on which you're going to be able to watch whatever it is they're coming up with. Now, they say it's not going to be political. Obviously, it's going to have some sort of slant, not necessarily saying bias, but it's going to be framed in some sort of like geopolitical thing. They're not going to be talking about how to make bundt cakes or anything like that. So I'm not real sure. It's not even clear what the content's going to be, but they've said it's not going to be political. On that note, there are people saying to boycott Netflix, people that don't like Obama. If you're starting to sort of like get like a tingle on the back of your neck, don't worry. I am not getting ready to get political, but essentially what I want to point out to people, whether you want to boycott Netflix or not, is that actually would do the opposite of what you want to do. So let's just assume whoever's listening, assume the role of someone who doesn't like Barack Obama for whatever reason, so much so that you're going to cancel your Netflix subscription. And let's say you're somebody that uses your Netflix subscription. For $10 a month, you watch maybe 4 or 5 movies at least. And that's pretty decent value if you're really getting that out of it. Maybe you've got one show you like to watch on Netflix that you can only watch on Netflix because it's a Netflix original. That's probably a pretty typical Netflix subscriber, if I had to guess. I'm just sort of making that up. But let's say that's you, and someone says boycott them, and you decide to boycott them. Well, basically what happens is, yes, you got rid of your subscription, and yes, Netflix is out your $10, but you now have removed yourself from the data pool that then tells Netflix what programs they should and should not keep. And so that's what I want to explain, like kind of how that works. So essentially, Netflix doesn't have like a rating system like a normal TV show, like a normal TV network or anything like that. They're their own thing, and they've developed their own proprietary algorithms that help tell them what shows they need to keep and not keep. prime example, they had a really expensive series that came out a couple of years ago called Marco Polo. They I think they thought it was going to be kind of their Game of Thrones type of thing. Really expensive show, high production value. Didn't get the views, so they canceled it. Well, how does Netflix know they're not getting the views? Well, obviously they can just see what the view count is. Netflix is not interested in the actual view count. So even for whatever shows, because it's going to be multiple things, it's not going to be like one show that the Obamas are going to put out. It's going to be a couple of different things that they're probably going to have on like a rotation. If I'm just guessing that, but it's going to be a decent amount of content. And what they're going to do is they're not going to just say, well, this only got X amount of views, we're going to kill it. What they look at generally is the percentage of each individual's person's view time of each thing. So let's say you are someone who really likes the Obamas. You're really interested in what they have to say. You decide to watch their programs and you love them. You love what they're putting out. You watch them every week and you spend, let's say you spend an hour a week watching the new Obama show that just dropped, and they put one out every single week for a year. So you're watching an hour of the Obamas every week for a year, and then your other time on Netflix is maybe a 30-minute show and maybe 2 movies a month. So almost 50% of your time is spent watching the Obamas. That indicates to Netflix that show, that series, that programming keeps you a subscriber. And so that's what they're looking at. And not just for one person, they're looking across the whole gambit. Now, let's say you're somebody that, you're the same person. You like the Obamas, you like their show, you watch it, but you also watch 3 movies a week, you watch 2 different shows, and you probably spend, like me, you probably spend, I don't know, 8 to 10 hours a week watching Netflix, and one of those is the Obama show. That does not indicate to Netflix that that show is keeping you a subscriber. So your views count less. So essentially, by boycotting Netflix, you completely take yourself out of this data pool, because let's say another scenario, which is what I probably should have led with, let's say you hate the Obamas, you don't want to watch them, you hate that Netflix is taking them on, but let's say maybe you only watch, like I said, 3 or 4 movies a month, and you don't watch the Obama show. That also indicates that show is not keeping your subscription in place. But if you just boycott them, Netflix doesn't care about you anymore. Yeah, they'll try to market to you and whatever, but as far as determining what to keep, you're now irrelevant. So I think that's kind of interesting that people are wanting to just boycott them out of anger, out of completely misplaced anger, and then they're essentially being counterproductive. You're giving up, you're taking your play, you're not able to watch what you want to watch, and you're not even doing anything. And so the people that first started screaming boycott probably should have researched how the Netflix algorithm works before really flipping their bitch switch and just going a little nuts. But I thought that was interesting. Not the worst comment I received over the past week by any means, but really made me think more about that and made me realize, hey, if you boycott Netflix, you're really not doing anything. So keep that in mind. If Netflix ever does anything that you don't like, keep your subscription. Again, I'm not sponsored by Netflix. Keep your subscription. Watch what you want to watch. Don't watch what you don't want to watch. And Netflix will figure it out. They will figure out what to keep and what not to keep. Speaking of Netflix, a couple of things I watched this week. Cargo is a Netflix original from Australia. It is sold as a zombie movie, and I actually did a full review on it last week. You can check that out on the YouTube channel as well. But it is not a zombie movie. There are zombies in it, but it really is about a father trying to find a home for what appeared to be a 6-month-old girl. Essentially, the setup is he gets bit early on in the movie, and he has a ticking clock. He knows how much time he has, and he's out in the brush, like out in the outback, and has to try to find somebody to take her before his time is up. So very, very interesting premise. That's the setup. It's good. If you don't even, I had some people in the comments said that they don't like zombie movies and they avoided this. They liked my review. They went and watched it. They came back and commented and said they really liked it. So I'd recommend that. There's a little bit of gore in it. You know, you see bites and stuff. You see a little bit of guts, but it's not overly done. If you're sensitive to gore, you should be fine with this one. You'll probably dig it. 24 Hours to Live is another one I watched on Netflix. Cool little Ethan Hawke action movie. It's probably not good enough to get a sequel, but it's also like I was pleasantly surprised. Like I had no interest to see this movie. Had some commenters recommend it. Went and checked it out. I liked it. It made my list of action movie recommendations recently, and it's a cool flick. I dug it. Bad Day for the Cut, I've already talked about on this podcast. I'm not going to talk about it again, but like I said, I will be releasing a full review on Thursday of this week, so check that out on the YouTube channel. Something not on Netflix, Game Night is something that, it wasn't last night. It was Friday night. No, that was Friday night, me and the wife rented Game Night with Jason Bateman. Because of the way this channel works, my brain is just constantly going. Like, I'm constantly trying to come up with lists. And then once I have a list of movies I want to recommend, I'm thinking, like, how am I going to frame it? What are all my thoughts on this movie, and how can I best condense that down into about a minute? It's just this constant, like, hamster wheel that's going. And I'm like, man, I've got to like just chill out for a little bit. So rather than watching something really thought-provoking, I just wanted to kind of turn my brain off. I'm like, let's just watch Game Night. This was way funnier than I thought it was going to be. Like, I was really surprised at how good it was. Now, it's just a silly comedy. You know, it's an adult comedy, but it's not overly raunchy. They're not trying too hard. It's got a good sense of humor. It was actually filmed fairly close to where I live, so I recognized some of the places. So that was kind of cool. And then just Jason Bateman, I don't know why I don't know why I had such low expectations. He almost always makes good decisions. On a Jason Bateman kit, I'm currently trying to watch Arrested Development on Netflix. I've said before, it's hard for me to watch a series because I have to watch you don't understand how many movies I have to watch to maintain this YouTube channel. Like, if you're a podcast listener, I'm going through a ton of movies here, but I give you even more. I recommend, and not just like talk about 30 movies a week. I recommend 30. Do you realize how many movies I have to watch to come up with 30 a week to recommend? It's crazy. So, I don't remember where I was going with that. But with that said, I just was really surprised by Game Night. Oh, no, what I was going to say was I'm watching Arrested Development. I'm having a little trouble getting through it because I have to watch so many movies. I don't have time to watch a show, that takes up more hours than a movie. But I've always loved Arrested Development. It's funny. The new series is funny, but I'm only 2 or 3 episodes in. But to me, it feels like they're trying really hard to just be like, and then this person went over there, and then they did this, and then they're working really hard on all the layering, which is part of what makes that show so good. But they almost are like focused so much on that, and there's not room for any jokes. Like the first episode, I clocked it at we were 10 minutes in before they finished recapping the last season. So I'm not super in love with it so far. I mean, by no means is it terrible, but I don't know, man. Hopefully it picks up. I'm going to finish it probably by next week, but that's enough for talking about a series. We'll get back on the movies. Another one I can give a tepid recommendation for is Free Fire. It's currently available on Amazon Prime. Cool shootout movie, good cast. It's got Sharlto Copley, Armie Hammer, Brie Larson. Man, it's got a couple other people in it. But it all takes place in a warehouse. The whole movie's essentially a shootout. Cool, but also just kind of all right, let's... It sort of drags, and you're just watching people you can't keep up with who's where very well, and it's a little sloppy. The only reason I'm talking about it is if you like that type of a movie, it takes place in the 70s too, so it's kind of got a little flavor, but if you like just kind of a shootout type thing, you'll dig it enough. I mean, it's not that good, but I enjoyed it because I like those types of movies. If you do, you'll probably enjoy it. If that's not your particular type of thing, don't even bother. Just stay away from this one altogether. And then let's talk about whether or not movies suck anymore today. I know it is a perception a lot of people have. It's certainly one that I've had. In fact, my first, if you've been following me for a while, you probably missed this. My very first episode on YouTube, a little over a year ago, was about this. Do movies suck? And essentially what I proposed at the time was that they don't. That, if you look back in the 1940s and you look back at every single year, you look back at the 50s, the 60s, you look back at every single year, out of the 50s, we probably got, 20, 30, maybe 35 good movies. That's a lot of movies. Good movies, like that many. But that's only 2, 3, 3.5 on average a year. That's not much, for a whole decade. Now, I would argue that maybe the 70s had quite a bit more than that. I think a lot of people would probably agree with that. And I'm not talking about just movies that you like, because there are subgenre stuff. Like the 80s was full of just gory horror movies that some people just love. That doesn't make them good movies. They just don't fit into that particular camp. Anyway, it's a hard thing to debate, but essentially what I was saying is there's a lot of bad movies made back in the day too, but time has forgotten them. They haven't got remastered. The film hasn't been preserved. They haven't been transferred to DVD or Blu-ray. So coming back from a quick unscheduled break, the camera battery was dying because this camera doesn't do a good job of telling me that it's low. It looks full, and then all of a sudden it redlines on me. So anyway, essentially there's a lot of bad movies that used to come out, and they're just gone. They just disappeared. You can't keep track of them. I mean, there's a record. You can look at a list, but these movies essentially no longer exist. You cannot watch them. So they released garbage movies for forever, and we've only really remembered the good ones, and I think that creates a false perception that movies are worse today. We still get 2, 3, maybe even 4 really good movies a year that are remembered for a long time. Essentially, that's what I'm judging a movie on. I had somebody ask me recently, how do you judge a good movie? Because I didn't like a particular movie that he liked. And I said, I really said it really comes down to rewatchability. And I thought more about that. I was at a restaurant earlier today having a hamburger that was decent. Like, it was a place known for burgers, and I ordered their signature burger, and it was okay. Like, it was decent. I enjoyed it. I won't ever go order that burger again. But there are certain things in my life that, like, I would eat anytime I had the opportunity to eat. There is a particular place in Mississippi, of all places, that has a roast beef po' boy that is, I will eat that any day of the week. I've eaten, I don't know how many in my life. A good movie is like that. You'll rewatch it. A great movie, rather. A good movie, you can watch, you can enjoy it. You might watch it again, and then that's about it. And that's a lot of what we're getting today. So I've kind of changed my tune on this from when I created that video the first time, and it's that they're creating a lot of what I would say passable movies. They're good. A lot of the Marvel movies fit into this camp. There's a lot of hype about them. A lot of people get excited. It comes out. It gets good reviews. People like it. No one's talking about, I just talked about Thor Ragnarok here on this podcast. No one's talking about the second Thor movie or the first and how good it was. There's a couple of those Marvel movies that have sort of held up to time. But essentially, we consume it and then we crap it out and we move on to the next one, the next one, the next one. And they're creating them that way. The production's great on them. And I would say I even talked about Jurassic World. They're going down that path too in the way they're creating it, where the production's amazing. It's going to be exciting and fun to watch. I own the last one, the first Jurassic World. I think I watched it once after I bought it. Like, it's just, It's good. It's just not great. It's just missing that rewatchability. So what I did was I said, like, hey, what are some really highly rewatchable movies from my perspective that have come out over the past year? And so I'd kind of changed my tune where I'm like, yeah, they're really not making movies like that anymore. And after making a list, I am wrong. So just kind of go on a ride with me here. Let's talk about some movies that are highly rewatchable. You may not agree with every pick on here, but odds are the list as a whole is going to kind of stand out to you, and you go, oh wow, those were all good. Now, these are all movies that have come out. It's 2018. These are all movies that have come out no later than 2008. So the past decade, the past 10 years is what we're going to talk about. First one that came to mind without me even having to look anything up, Mad Max Fury Road. Just an incredible ride. Fantastic. It's full of action, but you know what? The Transformers, those movies are full of action. But what Mad Max did was it really told the story with action. And you don't realize it the first time you're watching it, but it glues you to your seat because, not just because you don't know what's coming next, but because there's so much happening. There's so much unfolding. This person's going there, and then this shoots into that, and that blocks up the wheel, and now they can't steer the wheel, and then that means this happens, and then they finally get the wheel out, but then the shifter breaks, and it just does this incredible, incredible job. It was so well written from the get-go and so well conceptualized that it's a masterpiece of action. Really, really easily one of the best movies to have come out in the past 10 years, because 20 years from now, people will still be hailing Mad Max Fury Road, no matter what happens with any sequels that come after it. This one is still going to be watched, gushed over. Another one, I've already talked about it, so I'll be brief. Blade Runner 2049. It's going to stand up to time, I think. I think it's going to be analyzed more. It's going to not become a major part of the culture, but it's going to ingrain itself in the culture at some level. Whereas, just for laziness' sake, Transformers just doesn't do that. You consume it, you move on to the next one. I don't know anyone that has watched the first Transformers movie multiple times over the past several years. Point being, no one cares about those earlier movies anymore. They just want the next one. The Dark Knight, easy pick. We don't need to go on to why that one was so great. It did come out, just for your records, it did come out in 2008, so it barely makes the list. But in the past 10 years, that's one of them. Another Christopher Nolan, Inception. You can almost put any Christopher Nolan movie since The Dark Knight on this list, but I'm just going to go with Inception as being just one of those that really stands out. Even if you didn't particularly like it, it really stands out in terms of being different, unique, and I think highly rewatchable. For a change of pace, a smaller movie, I think Whiplash was one of the better movies of the year. It came out. I think that one's highly rewatchable, really well crafted. Django Unchained is one of my favorite Tarantino movies to have come out recently. It's got a little bit of silliness to it that loses me a little bit, but it also does some really just incredible things. I think it's really kind of something new and different for him. I think, even just some of the performances in that one. By the way, I'm sorry, but the Academy, I didn't even watch the Academy Awards this past year. I'm so over it. The Harvey Weinstein shit was the nail in the coffin for me. But point being, I don't know. I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole I don't want to go down. But Leonardo DiCaprio got robbed for at least a supporting nomination in Django. His performance in that is incredible. And the only reason they didn't nominate him is because he was a slave owner. They're so fucking goofy with that shit. It's like he's the bad guy. He can be a slave owner and still have an amazing performance. It's one of the most incredible villain performances. Just really fantastic. Side note, because this is a podcast, I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. a lot of you probably know this by now because it is really sort of become part of the legend of that movie. Sort of the point where he comes back to the table and he's got the skull and like the gig is up. He knows what's going on. Right when he's like kind of tells him to sit back down, he slams his hand down on the table. He actually cuts it on a piece of glass. He like breaks a little crystal thing and he cuts his hand. And you remember in the movie, his hand's bleeding. They wrap it up. He smears of blood all over her face, and it's this whole thing. He actually cut his hand and was bleeding really badly and never broke character. Now, what I don't know for sure, I think they might, because it's multiple takes to get a scene like that, but in the moment where he cut it and it starts bleeding, it's one take, he acted through it. I'm willing to bet they cleaned him up. They started running again with fake blood. I can't imagine him smearing his real blood on her face. If anyone has any information on that, I would love to hear it, but that sounds horrific if he really rubbed his blood all over, I can't remember her name, but all over her face. Pixar movies. WALL-E, it's not my favorite, but it is a beautiful little movie. It's really well crafted. It's just a beautiful little piece of cinema. I think it's like the only kids movie I got on here. Guardians of the Galaxy. That series is going to hold up. I mean, it stands out as being a little different on this list, but as far as that type of a genre, really, really stand out. I would have loved to put No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood, which were both filmed at the same time in Plano, Texas. It came out the same year. Two of my favorite movies. They came out in 2007, so they don't make this list. They did fit into the 2008 Oscars, but we've already passed the 2008 Oscars, so we're just outside of 10 years. I think Grand Budapest Hotel is one of, if not Wes Anderson's best films so far. That came out recently. District 9 has come out in the past 10 years. That's one of the biggest surprise, sort of just sci-fi movies we've gotten in a long time. John Wick is another one of the best action movies to have come out in a long time. These movies are all going to hold up. At least I think most of them will. They sort of fit into what I'm talking about as being rewatchable and sort of not just rewatchable, but you're going to be able to watch the first John Wick in 20 years and still think it's badass. If you're listening now, you're maybe in your teens or early 20s and you like John Wick, you're going to be able to watch that one with your kids and still enjoy it. It's like going to be like an old Bronson movie or something like that. In Bruges is one of my favorites. I think it's on Netflix now, and it'll be added to Prime soon. If you've not seen that, it's a really fantastic movie by the same writer-director as Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. In Bruges is the better movie, despite the awards for the other. Avatar has come out in the past 10 years. Drive, I think, is just a fantastic little movie that's going to really hold up. I have Birdman on this list. I really, really enjoyed that when it came out. I thought it was really special. I haven't really wanted to rewatch it much, though, so maybe I need to not have it on the list. Gravity was really special. Whether you liked it or not, it really is kind of an important movie for how it was made, how it was shot, and just the way it told the story. That's a real standout. One of the best action movies. I know I've got quite a few action movies. This one holds up with Fury Road and John Wick. The Raid 2. If you have never seen The Raid 2, stop what you're doing. Well, finish listening to this for another 5 minutes or so. But watch The Raid 2 tonight. Rent it. It is going to be worth the $4 or $5 it's going to cost. You can, I rent it. It is from Indonesia. It is there. You don't need to have seen the first Raid. They essentially like erase everything that happened in the first one in the first few minutes of this one. I'll go ahead and tell you, you're going to feel like you're lost. In the first 10 minutes of the movie, it sort of corrects itself. It sets a new story in motion, and then you just go with that. They sort of address some things from the first one, and then they basically do something that makes them not matter, and then you're off to the races with the Raid 2. Really incredible gangster infiltration action movie with real fighting. I mean, they are hitting each other in this movie. Some people got seriously hurt because they made it in Indonesia, not the U.S., with all the rules and regulations. Speaking of regulations, The Wolf of Wall Street, Fantastic movie, very rewatchable, very, very similar to, much like a spiritual sequel to Casino, in my opinion, just in terms of like its flavor and sort of pace and a kind of exciting sort of like whirlwind. The Nice Guys for a recent one. Another Ryan Gosling movie. I am a fan of his. And then I almost didn't put this one on, but fuck it, I like this movie a lot. Looper. It's surprising, and I've watched this one a bunch. I've watched it. I think it's great. Anyway, I'm not even going to count them up. I mean, that was easily 20 that I came up with real quick from the past 10 years. That's 2 a year. There are more. You can think of some. There are plenty, and these are just ones that I've personally liked. That doesn't mean they're the only good movies to have come out in the past 10 years. So with that, I kind of am flip-flopping on this. I cannot figure out, like, are movies worse today? There certainly are a lot of bad movies, but we're going to forget about those in 20 years, and we're going to remember movies like these. So, and the reason I even thought about this is we're in a real drought. I mean, yeah, there's, Deadpool's out and Solo, but as far as like something just new and original, man, I'm thirsty for it. So I'm ready for some new good stuff this year. So far, 2018 hadn't been treating me too good in terms of movies, new releases rather. I've discovered some movies that were a little older, or at least a few years older, that I never saw, that I've really, really enjoyed. I've talked about those on the channel and the podcast. If you're new here, definitely listen to some older ones, see what you like. Definitely check out the YouTube channel. I've got some little like 10-minute videos where I basically give you 10 movie recommendations, talk about each one for about a minute. That format is very, very popular. But I've got some more notes here, but I've basically said everything on this note. What am I saying? Oh, but so I think part of the problem, one thing I did want to say on this is, I mentioned the passable movies. I think part of the reason we're getting so many of those is it works out monetarily. If you think about it, they need a movie they can market and get a lot of people to go see. So let's use the Black Panther as an example. Broke records, ton of people saw that movie, and it's good. I don't think it's great. I don't think, even if you really liked it, I don't think you're going to care too much about it in 20 years. Part of the reason is it feels a lot like all the other Marvel movies. It sort of blends in really well. Even though it really is unique unto itself, it's also not. Not hating on the movie. It's a good movie, but it's also a good example of, it's much more valuable, I think, for the studio to get 4 butts in the seat that only watch the movie the one time, maybe rent it once after, but that's all that they do with the movie. They have that experience, and then they move on to the next Marvel movie. It gets them to watch the next Black Panther movie, rather than, say, with Blade Runner, the one guy that goes by himself, sits, watches it, goes and buys another ticket, so that's 2, and then buys it on Blu-ray, and rewatches it over and over and over again and burns a hole in it. Now, that guy has viewed it way more times than those 4 people viewed Black Panther, yet they spent more money on it. There's more revenue in it for them, for the studio. That's all they need. Proof of this, Mad Max was the first movie I talked about. Warner Brothers is currently, like, the sequel has been announced. Tom Hardy's on for 2 more movies. It's going to be a trilogy. It's been a couple of years now. Well, they haven't started production yet. They're ready to start production. The script is finished. What are they doing? Why aren't they making this movie? We all want to see it. Warner Brothers is currently squabbling with George Miller, the director, over $5 million. Essentially, they were going to get a $5 million bonus, and this wasn't just going to go to his pocket. This is for like the whole production team to divvy out and everything. If the movie hit a certain mark, box office wise, they hit the mark, but then Warner Brothers is saying, no, but you guys went over budget. And it basically comes down to nuances in the contract, and both sides think that they're right. And essentially, I don't know who's right because I'm not a lawyer, but the fact that Warner Brothers is going to squabble over $5 million on a big property like that that's going to make them a ton of money is an indication to me that they're like, screw it. We got a line of other movies And we don't care. Not that they wouldn't make money on Mad Max, but they got something else in the chamber to replace it, essentially. And they don't care that Mad Max is one that people are going to love and watch and rewatch for longer, because they got something else with somebody in it from a comic book that they can just kind of shove up our ass for, $18 for an IMAX ticket, and then we never watch it again. So that's kind of the impression I'm getting based on not just research for this particular topic, but just heavy consumption of not just movies, but movie news, things like that. Meanwhile, I say all that, and Hollywood had a record low year last year as far as recent years. They're just not getting the butts in the seats as much as they should be, or at least as much as they used to, because people are staying home, watching stuff on Netflix, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. If you like what I'm doing, review the podcast. It helps the channel grow. If you are watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. If you do subscribe, click that little bell icon, because YouTube's so goofy. It essentially means nothing to just subscribe anymore. So there's that. But I think I'm getting the hang of this thing. I've got to do a few more. I'm getting the format down. I'm pretty happy with this. Looking forward to a full week of some solid movie recommendations. If you're still listening, I'll go ahead and tell you what I got coming up. Where is it? I'm doing revenge movies on Wednesday, the best revenge movies to watch on Netflix, which will feature Bad Day for the Cut, which I talked about here. Thursday, I'll be doing a full review of Bad Day for the Cut. I recommend, if you like the way I'm talking about it here, go ahead and watch it. And then Thursday, the review will sort of explain my thoughts on it, and then I'll get into some spoilers late in that video, and I'll talk a little bit about the villain and the ending and all of that. And then I don't know what I'm going to do at the end of the week. I've got some research prepped for good vampire movies that you can watch on Prime, Netflix, and Hulu. I might go with that. I might do something else. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. But thank you very much for listening and or watching. I will keep making this show as long as you keep paying attention to it and keep watching it and listening to it. But thanks for watching and listening this time, and you will see or hear me next time. Thank you.